Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm going to be exploring the Leo new moon. Now, as far as the sun's concerned, this is the most potent and exuberant new moon of the whole year. And this one also has a special extra ingredient, a wonderful angle to the planet of fortune and growth of Jupiter. What I'm going to do, as usual, is share with you exactly when this event is going to occur for you. I'm then going to go on to share the event chart wheel in terms of Placidus based on Universal Central Time, so we can see which house or which area of activity the new moon is going to be manifesting itself in, but also how the other planetary interactions are going to be critical to this. For example, Saturn is going to be in house 2, very much to do with everyday finance, and that of course is quite a hot topic at the present time. I'm then going to share a more basic wheel that we can all relate to as far as the Zodiac is concerned, to see where all the planets are. That's going to be really exciting too. And then finally, please stay with me, I will go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your sun or ascendant for the next month's potential. Now, if you would like to embrace more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, I can give you a roadmap that can guide you for the rest of your life. Also, within my special package of 30% off, I'll give you a 12-month personal forecast. Now, these charts are completely unique to you, totally one-off to your birth data, and can help you to understand some of the patterns that may have predominated in your life, but also where you can seize opportunities, because the information I share will give you a lot more insights. Please see the link below for more. And finally, if you've subscribed to my channel, thank you so much. But if you've yet to do so, I'd love to get to 101,000 subscribers as quickly as possible. I'm about halfway there towards that 1,000 extra mark. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. Now, this new moon is so incredibly exciting because the sun rules the sign of Leo. Now, when it comes to the moon's instincts, the Cancerian new moon is the most powerful in terms of emotion, Cancer, in terms of drive, passion, creativity, socially interacting with others. This is the best one of the whole year. Now, on the screen now, you can see exactly where it occurs in your locality. Now, I'm going to show on the screen now the event chart based on Universal Central Time. And you can see that the sun and the moon in Leo are clustered in house 7, very much about relating. So our relationships with one another are definitely critical at this time. But you can also see that Mercury's in Leo as well, and that is opposed by the strict energies of Saturn. So I think this is saying to us that we need to take our relationships seriously, that we need to be sincere. So if we want to be more creative and self-expressive, which this wonderful new moon, in its brilliant angle to Jupiter, the planet of growth, which you can see is in house 3, very much about chat. But what Saturn's saying is say what we mean, but also mean what we say. Also, you can see that Saturn is in house 2 and in retrograde. So the financial crunch that we're all experiencing is going to be, I think, building in intensity. You can also see that Saturn is in a more broad right angle with Uranus, the planet of freedom, and that's in the sector of the home of emotions. And we also have Uranus and the North Node approaching their exact conjunction, which occurs across the 31st of July and the 1st of August, depending on where you are. Now, I should say, if you want to check out my special North Node Uranus Mars conjunction video, please see the link beneath this video. So Saturn is in that right angle with Uranus, but also in a right angle with the node. I'm pretty close to being in a right angle with Mars. So when it comes to financial or finances linked to our homes, our properties, and so forth, you can see that there is the potential for restriction. So what does this buzzing energy in the sign of Leo tell us? Well, it tells us that we need each other, that we need to find ways to cooperate and collaborate, because that's what House 7 is about. It's about trying to find ways to interact with people in a coordinated manner. It's not necessarily the time to go it alone. The sign of Leo does bring passion because it's a fire sign, also because it likes to attract attention, and this particular Leo new moon is in the first 10 degrees of the sign of Leo, so in the first decan, so it has a double sun energy. So I think if we can put much more emphasis in finding ways to be supportive with one another, it can help us to deal with the reality of how costs have risen. I think that's really, really important with this particular event. So on the screen now, I'm sharing the more simplified overall zodiac wheel that we can all relate to. And that starts with Aries as being the first zodiac sign, so we can think of that in terms of house 1. The collective, including Mercury, that is in Leo, is house 5. So that's very much to do with that go-getting, confident response. And the relationship between Jupiter and the Sun is one of the most fortunate of all. And I do feel that some YouTube astrologers will characterize this new moon as being a fabulous opportunity to mix and mingle. I think we need to look a little bit deeper than that. You can see, as I mentioned before, that Saturn is in the sign of Aquarius. That's house 11 or sign 11. That's the collective. But in that more serious chart, it is influenced in the second house, very much to do with everyday finances. In this more simplified chart, the collective in Taurus, which is the second zodiac sign, is very much about everyday costs, our self-worth. And of course, that's being crunched by Saturn. So our collective situation is being influenced by the cost of living increases that we're facing. But I think the energy of Leo and the energy of Jupiter in Aries is asking us to try to find fun ways to make, or more creative or imaginative ways to try to manage this situation for ourselves. And of course, in the more serious natal chart for the event, the collective of Leo is all in house 7, including Venus, the ruler of the sign of Libra, which is very much to do with relating. And even though that is in the sign of Cancer, that's actually forging a really positive angle to Mars, Uranus and the North Node. And that gives us a bit of an insight, really, if we can be more protective and more cautious about how we use resources, but find ways to, for example, if we're playing with children, using things that, say, recycling materials to make things, that can be just as much fun as going to a local store and spending on something new, and very engaging for them, pushing them to use their enthusiasm and imagination. And that type of playfulness is something that can counteract some of the more restrictive and challenging influences that we are experiencing in the world at the present time. So now please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your sun or your ascendant, or both if they're different, to give you a flavour of what you can expect as we break into the start of August. And really the influence of the new moon is a 4-week period, and obviously it will taper off as time goes on. But for Aries, it's a great place to have the new moon because, of course, Leo is a sister fire sign. So for you, this is the part of your situation where you can really manifest the best of yourself, your enthusiasm, your ability to use your personality power to its absolute maximum. But of course, you do have that cluster of energy in house 2 of Taurus. So thinking about how you can use your resources as effectively as possible is definitely part of the equation. You can also see that Mercury is in a square with Mars. So I don't think this is a time to be too impetuous with spending. If you're somebody who does want to speculate somewhat, it's not to say you shouldn't do it, but I wouldn't rush into it. Mars, of course, is your ruler and gives you great instincts of when to stick or when to twist. In the sign of Taurus, Mars is slightly more ponderous, but that's not a bad thing when we have the very quick moving and electric energies of Uranus, which can see us decide to do something in a flash. Now, in terms of your love life, I think if you're single, there could be someone who is really going to impact on your senses over the next few weeks, and that could prove to be really quite exciting indeed. Now, Taurus, for you, the collective in the sign of Leo is all about where you live, how you live there, and with whom. Are you thinking of moving or improving? Or is it a case that you're going to move back in with your folks in order to save money, in order to get your own place? Lots of different variations on house 5 in a practical sense. But the 4th house is also about how we feel about things. It's also about our immediate environment. So that's going to be important. But with Mars and Uranus and the North Node together in your sign, there could be a much more impetuous side of yourself. So when it comes to emotional relationships in general, I think you could be feeling a little or could find yourself more inclined to be a bit more reactive. The sign of Cancer, which governs house 4, is not just proactive, it can be reactive. And there could be a degree of reactiveness around how you feel over the next few weeks. So if you can slow things down a little bit and think before you get into something that might be a little tense, you know, if you make a snap decision on a property matter, for example, it could be one that you do regret. So take a measured approach to situations and do think, on the whole, safety first. Even if at this present time there's probably a large part of you that really wants to shake things up and be much more spontaneous. Now, Gemini, for you, the collective in the sign of Leo is very much in keeping with the energy of your own sign. It's quick-witted, it's communicational. It could see you thinking about a new mode of transport or some new technology. The position of Jupiter in your sector of friendship suggests that there can be some people that you have very uplifting conversations with. But with Mars, Uranus and the North Node in your 12th house, your nervous system could be quite jagged and on edge. I think with Saturn in the mix, in the part of your situation that's to do with knowledge, the more you inform yourself of the legalities of a situation or understand the implications of any agreement you get into, just be aware that there may be some people around you who are not necessarily in your corner as much as you might like. And you may need to perhaps also become more conscious of balancing your mental and intellectual capabilities, which are often immensely strong, with a more feeling side of your nature. I think some emotional stuff linked to siblings or neighbours from your past could come into the open over the next few weeks. Now, Cancer, the new moon is always a good time for you, apart from perhaps the sign of Capricorn, where of course the moon is at its weakest. But I feel for you, this new moon is very much about how you feel about yourself. It's your self-worth. Now, if you're wanting to get busy and make the most of your resources and squeeze more from the assets you've got, this can be a busy and very productive time, particularly with Jupiter in such a bright and visible location. Great for applying for jobs and putting forward a very confident side of your nature. But with those planets, well, in the case of Mars and Uranus, but also the North Node in the sign of Taurus, that's very much about your future. And I think you might find that you could have some changes of mind about some plans that have been ongoing in a way that could even surprise you. With Saturn in a retrograde in the 8th house of your longer term finances, balancing the ins and outcomings, means that I wouldn't be too inclined to make snap decisions. You're one of the most skilled managers of resources in the zodiac, and I wouldn't forget, you know, all the experiences and knowledge you've gained over many years to go against that at the moment. But with Mars, Uranus and the North Node pushing you to get in touch with what really interests you and raises your vibration in terms of your longer term hopes, I think the more solid second house, which is about your everyday financial foundations, could be challenged by a more idealistic part of your nature at the current time. Now, Leo, of course, this is absolutely the best new moon of the year because it's in your sign. But as I mentioned before, your sign also is governed by the sun, which therefore makes this a very important new moon. And it's very much, I think, about really embracing the more individual side of your nature, because though Leos have this reputation of being very regal and very gracious and can draw a lot of admiration and respect from others, sometimes I feel that with Leos, because of your fixed nature, you'll stick with what you know, because changing it actually goes against the more conservative, with a small c, part of your nature. But what Mars, Uranus and the Node are saying to you is maybe the way you connect with the wider world needs shaking up big time. So this can be a time of new beginnings. And with Jupiter in your sector of travel, higher education and new experiences, whether it's to do with your work or your personal interests or even a relationship, something is in the works to do with change or to do with revitalizing ongoing strands that really excite you, but perhaps letting go of things that have lost their luster. Now, Virgo, this is a more complex new moon. The 12th house new moon is very much to do with our more spiritual, emotional and psychological well-being. You've also got your ruler Mercury tucked away on this event too, and that's challenged by Saturn in your sector of physical health. If you're feeling quite sensitive at the moment, or there's a situation that's proving to be rather oppressive, and you're not feeling that sense of freedom and joie de vivre that you really wanted to sample in a much more wholesome way in recent times, I feel that the next few weeks could see you really doing some soul searching and deciding about what you truly want from your future hopes. What Mars, Uranus and the North Node are saying to you is that if you're in a situation where you feel trapped, either in a job which is dull and there's a sense of stagnation around it, or a relationship which isn't very nurturing in an emotional sense, or it's very predictable, or some of your interests are restricted, or you feel you're going against a part of your nature that gives you a sense of excitement, I think that relationship could be another one that you're really thinking very deeply about over the next few weeks. So expect your emotional vitality to be a bit lower, but I actually feel that your nervous energy can be quite high. So that can actually be quite a challenging combination. So I think the key there is really just make sure you get plenty of early nights, eat and drink as best you can, try to do some positive things to get some exercise, to burn off the extra nervous energy that Mars and Uranus in particular are going to be creating, but at the same time be aware that peace, good energy around you are just as important as anything else. Which brings us to Libra. And for you, the new moon in Leo is very much about friendship. And it's also about your highest hopes. And it's about the part of your nature that is really more interested in principles, nobility. It can be to do with your friendships, your network. That's an area that's going to be really supercharged as well. Because Jupiter is in your opposite sign, there could be one person in a group or a network or a friend that really is a very important player for you at this time. If you're attracted to someone romantically, within that equation, just be aware that with Mars and Uranus in the mix, that can lead to a lot of desire for instant gratification. And in the 8th house, that can be of a sexual nature, or it can be spending money on potentially bigger ticket items if you've got available resources. And if it's because some part of your higher needs are not being met, try to understand why that might be. I think that's really, really important. But with Saturn opposite Mercury, if there is a relationship, a friendship that stifles you in some way, someone's overly critical, a bit cold, just at the time when you're looking for a lot of warmth in your life, I would think again about that relationship. So there can be some real highs with that Jupiter, Moon, Sun combination in the trine, but also a challenge with Saturn opposite Mercury. Now, Scorpio, obviously having the Sun in Leo is a wonderful opportunity to use its strength and vitalities at the core of everything we are. And for you, it's in the most visible part of your scope, the 10th house, which is all about how we connect to the wider world, how we raise our profile, our goals and ambitions, and a real opportunity here to reach for the stars, quite literally. With your traditional ruler Mars alongside Uranus, the planet which is exalted in your sign, in your sector of relating, however, and broadly in a right angle with the guys in Leo, but in a more acute right angle with Mercury, I think there could be some tensions in certain professional relationships. If you're not getting the feedback or recognition you really feel you deserve, you may be seriously considering changing your job. But with Saturn in the 4th house, pardon me, having a sense of security is important, or that could make you risk averse, and so you're sticking with something that isn't working. Or perhaps you're feeling you have to do a particular job because it brings in the money and you've got to protect those close to you. But I think that energy in your opposite sign really is provoking you to be much more confrontational, would be a strong word, but certainly to assert your boundaries. And if that helps you to make progress towards what really can help you to realise your talents and gain much greater appreciation for your gifts, then I would go for it. Which brings us to Sagittarius. And obviously Leo is a fellow fire sign. This is a wonderful new moon to think about getting away from it all. Change of scenes, spontaneity, very much living in, that part of your nature which likes to be free and adventurous. Now, I feel that COVID restrictions are going to come back in. Unfortunately, the Saturn-Uranus square, to me, really does presage a much greater restriction on our personal freedom. Uranus, personal freedom. Saturn, in the sign of the collective, restriction. It just seems to make sense. However, if you are able to go somewhere and navigate literally any obstacles around red tape, and in terms of which particular areas are allowing free movement, I think you'll be off. This next month definitely needs to see you break out and do something much more off the cuff to embrace that more spontaneous side of your nature. If you are thinking more about how you can add to your skills, I think that's a great way to go, because the 9th house energy is brilliant if you are thinking about a correspondence course, perhaps a full-time educational course that would really give you access to the kind of educational resources that can open up your future in a much more positive way. Then go for it. And of course, with Jupiter, your ruler, in your 5th house, why not do all these things and have fun? Is there a fly in the ointment? Maybe it's Mercury is squaring Mars. Mercury in your 9th house competing with Mars in the part of your situation which makes you conscious of the things that you have to be more self-sacrificing around. So your commitments, your obligations. If you do feel too hemmed in by those, I think you could feel quite wired. So a bit of nervous energy going around, and if you can, even if you have to stick with the routine to some degree, have some changes of scene, watch some different films, or have some different exercise routines, change your diet a little bit. All these things can just add a bit more colour and texture to your existence, and that can help you to feel that you are shaking things up, even if you don't quite have the full ability to head off to somewhere glamorous, exotic, and rather exciting in the way that we all think about, and some of us occasionally are lucky enough to do. Capricorn, for you, the sign of Leo is very much about change, transformation. It's where you're most invested in your life. If you have things that you feel really passionate about, or a person you feel passionate about, it can be lit up during this time. But the 8th house, of course, can be a time of endings as much as beginnings. If you're someone who's really interested in personal development, psychological understanding, anything to do with the type of work that I'm sharing with you, astrology or psychology, that helps you to understand human motivation and your own in a more profound way, then this can be an exciting next few weeks. Of course, your ruler, Saturn, is in retrograde, and for you it's in house 2, which is very much about everyday finance. And although you have that very wonderful bubbly mix of energy in Mars, Uranus and the North Node in your 5th house, which is more attuned really to being more risk-taking, I think Saturn's just saying, that part of your nature which is so steadfast, thorough, goes through details in a very systematic and meaningful way, that's a great antidote to the more risk-taken and, quite honestly, potentially rather excitable energies in the sign of Taurus. That could see you wanting to very much enjoy and indulge your senses, particularly in a romantic viewpoint, from a romantic viewpoint. So house 5 and house 8, is very tuned up towards intimacy, but it also can be where we become much more aware of a person's control or jealousy, or those people who in some way want to manipulate us. So whether that's socially or in an ongoing romantic relationship. So we could think about your ruler being in retrograde in the 2nd house as being very much about your self-worth or your values and how they fit together with someone else. So some deep conversations are going to be in the works. Or is there someone with a magnetic personality that you're going to find irresistible? Or is someone going to find you irresistible? Well, of course, it's that way around. It's got to be you. It's going to be irresistible. And remember, Mars is exalted in your sign, and you do have a very sensual nature. And so it's really being activated with this collection of energy in the sign of Taurus. This brings us to Aquarius. It's all about relationships over the next few weeks. Now, because Mercury, the planet of communication, is in your opposite sign, Mercury is exalted in Aquarius, and it is in an opposition with Saturn in your sign. So that's a bit of a tough one, to be honest. There could be someone that confronts you with a message in a very blunt and direct and even cold-eyed way. That might not be very heartwarming. But what that can also do, that aspect, is see us become much more conscious of trying to be as sincere as possible. The energy in the 7th house of the Sirius chart is fab for you because, of course, your sign is also going to be, the energy in Leo is the 7th house of the sign or the sun of Aquarius. So relationships, whether they work, whether they don't work, could be a surprise around the family matter. Someone could suddenly get in touch. Someone may want to in some way impose their viewpoints on you, which could be a bit challenging, especially around a property matter, to be honest. If you are negotiating around property, things can be very unsettled and rather frustrating. But if you are single and you'd like to meet someone new, you can showcase the very best of yourself over the next few weeks, as long as you can sort of be aware that there may be a kind of unusual impatience in terms of, you know, how quickly people come back to you, how fast they tune into where you're coming from. You could be a bit more revved up because of that Mars Uranus conjunction. And if you remember in 2018, Mars just parked up in Aquarius between May and October. I can't remember exactly. I don't think Mars was in Aquarius for the whole of that period. There may have been a retrograde. I'm pretty sure there was. But it did go into a square with Uranus, and that caused some real mischief for Aquarius people. Perhaps also for other fixed signs, you know, Taurus, Scorpio, Leo as well. But certainly for Aquarius, when it came to family matters, there could be a bit more about that now, or maybe it's going to be more about the physical domain of where you live. And if you wanted to change that, and perhaps working with contractors or people can help you, you just could be a lot more impatient and wired up than is normally the case. But that doesn't mean to say you can't make progress. And at the end of the day, the new moon in Leo gives you a great opportunity to come across in a very compelling, attractive and alluring way. Which brings us, as ever, to Pisces, never least but last, because you're the last of the 12 zodiac signs. So what do we make of this new moon for you? Well, I think it's a chance to think about the practicalities in your life, which sound about as sexy as a fly spray. I'm so sorry to use that analogy. It's probably because it's been a bit hot where we are and we had to get one, even though we don't really like sprayy things. So seriously, the sixth house gets a bit of a bad rep because it's a kind of Virgo energy, but of course the sign of Leo is about warmth. And therefore, if you can use passion to find a job which reflects your talents or interests, or also the side of you that can be very self-sacrificing, better than the one you have now, go for it. If you can bring in some new exercise routines, become more conscious of the nutrients in the food that you're consuming. If the people that you help have been taking that a little bit for granted of late, with the position of Saturn in retrograde in your 12th house, that could be having a wearing impact on your mental and emotional health, particularly with Mercury, the ruler of Virgo, also in your 6th house. So I think if you need to have a break and look after yourself, go to a spa, pamper yourself, you know, go for a gentle walk with a friend. A swim may be very nice as well. Anything which gives you the opportunity to just soothe your being would be a real smart thing to do. But with Jupiter in your 2nd house, forging a link in a positive way with the Sun and the Moon in the 6th, some kind of serendipity could fall for you around a job over the next few weeks. The collection of energy in Uranus is very 3rd housey, so that's turning your nervous system up to max. You might find it very, very hard to sit still over the next few weeks. So I think it's important that you do use any excess nervous energy in a practical way. Otherwise you could find yourself feeling a bit snappy, particularly Mars squaring up with Mercury. That's a little bit challenging. So doing that exercise, even if it's gentle, can actually be something that really can give you quite a lift. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me. Please stay safe, take care, and goodbye for now.